Hello everyone and welcome to this webinar from Annie Clements from Autism and ADHD, where we're going to be talking about what to do while waiting for an autism or ADHD assessment, which I'm sure will be a really useful session for those of you that have joined today. So before I hand over to Annie, I'm just going to give you a couple of background slides about the charity. If you've joined our webinars before, it's probably very familiar to you, but I think it's really important just to go over them just in case. So the vision of the charity is to be a supportive community in which everyone has the chance to live their life to the full. And our intention is that we will be there when times are tough to help people to get back on their feet again. We offer a range of things. We offer financial assistance, which is the thing that we're probably the best known for, but a whole range of other services to support you as well around caring, health, well-being, and so on. And this is a really important slide. Never apologise for repeating this one because I think it's really important that you remember it. So we are the charity for civil servants, which means that while you are a civil servant, we are your charity, but we will remain your charity when you leave the civil service, whether you leave to go to a new career or whether you stay in the civil service until you retire. We will continue to be your charity. If there are people in your life who have been civil servants in the past, remind them that we are their charity as well. We're not a membership organisation, it's eligibility, and that's your eligibility, having been or being a civil servant. And of course, you don't need to donate to the charity in order to get service from us. It's great if you can, because that's how we do the good work that we do. But we also know that not everyone is always in a position to do that. So, you don't have to. We are always there for you, regardless. And a couple of things about housekeeping to start with. So David's already put a couple of notes in the Q&A today. So the chat function is disabled. So please put any questions that you have in the Q&A. We have an hour this morning, and Annie will get through as many of your questions as she can within the hour. You can choose to ask a question as anonymous rather than with your name. So just bear that in mind, and closed captions can also be added to your personal view if you wish to do that. So I'm going to move on now. I'm going to stop sharing my slides and I'm going to come off screen and I'm going to hand you over to Annie.
Hi everyone, just give me a moment because I've now got to do the whizzy stuff and get you my sides, which is always a little bit of a journey. But we seem to be doing well today. Is it going to give me slideshow? Oh, it's not letting me move it into the big screen at the moment. Hold on. If necessary, we'll just carry on with the little slides. I hope not. We don't have to do that for you. As it just says sliders view.
Annie, I'll try taking it off the screen for a moment in case that helps you.
Yeah, it might be. It's not giving me the whole screen, if you see what I mean, to be able to move into slideshow and and give you
I wouldn't want
here we go. There we are. We always get there in the end. I'll take my little face off so you don't have to look at me. No, it's not going to do that today. It'll stick me up in the corner. So, as you can see, I've changed the slide title just a little bit into understanding neurodivergent nervous systems before and beyond diagnosis. For those of you that not been to one of our trainings before, I'm the founder and chief executive of Autism and ADHD, which is a not-for-profit social enterprise based in Suffolk, but currently working globally. And we've been supporting the work of the civil service charity now for 4 years. And it's a piece of work that we are really passionate about. They're a wonderful team, and I hope you will make the most of the opportunities that you have with them. So let's get straight into this so that we can help you move forward. So, as I said, many of you have heard me speak before over the years, and as I said, our thinking and global knowledge has continued evolving. And I think it's really important to recognise that we are in a period of new knowledge, which is exciting, but it's also making sure that you guys get the information that you need and can move forward, even if you're sitting on one of those horrible waiting lists at the moment. So where we're concentrating the new knowledge for us at the moment is around nervous systems, family well-being, emotional labour. What we mean, the amount of energy it takes for us to deal with our emotional load, and the cumulative pressures experienced by ND individuals across everyday life. Our 4 foundation blocks that we use are now more important than ever, as we can now see how they mesh together in a way that we hadn't got the science behind that before, and that is really exciting. So we are now very much in a place of changing the global narrative of supporting neurodivergent people inside neurotypical systems to changing systems so that neurodivergent people don't have to constantly survive them. And I think that is a really important shift. It's something we came up with that terminology, just so that you know. We don't want us and systems to have to constantly make adjustments for us moving forward. We want the systems themselves to adjust so that we don't have to keep chasing that ever frustrating system that doesn't always work in our ways. So, first steps for you to think about. What made you think about neurodivergence as something that is possible for yourselves, and how did that make you feel? Did you feel really positive about that? Was it scary? Was it something that overwhelmed you? Because it can be. And I think for those of you that are identifying that as adults, I went through that myself with my ADHD diagnosis, finding out about it because of my children, which is where a lot of us end up in that space. And so I think it's important to really recognize that. Don't just jump straight into the diagnosis. Have a think about it. How am I feeling about this? You know, where are we going to go with this? What's it going to mean for me in the future? Can be really important. And equally, if you've got a child that's sitting on a waiting list, it's the same thing for them. You know, if you have shared that with them, how's it made them feel? How have you supported them through that process? So, do we have to wait for an assessment before doing anything? Absolutely not. And yet the system itself is not set up for that at the moment. We're still in a system right now where employers want that magic piece of paper. Schools want that magic piece of paper to confirm. One of the things that we're working hard now is to get the system to change, to realise it's about meeting need, not following a piece of paper. All right, so watch this space, because things are starting to shift slowly. Clearly, the earlier you start making changes, the better for yourself and for your child and anybody else in your family. It is about changing things based on understanding that will help everyone, and none of the interventions even will harm you. This is the thing that's really incredible. Neurodivergence is helping us understand humans, not the other way around. And the intervention, support processes, adjustments actually help everybody in the room, which is why we're now focusing on, let's get these systems moving. And in the meantime, you can pick up things that we talk about today and start using them straight away to help calm that central nervous system down, meaning that you sleep better. The world is just better by putting these things into place right now. So if you do nothing, all right, those behaviours that you're seeing both in yourself and your family will escalate. Your communication structure will get harder. You'll start to lose your sense of self, of who you are. Your masking will increase and lead to long-term trauma, which can then cause issues at school and at work. So be proactive, get involved now. Even if you've got people around go, well, you don't really know, do you, whether it is or not, is that the right thing? Squash that. All right, it is the right thing. You've clearly got some needs, whether it gets an ADHD or autism diagnosis at the end of all of the assessment procedure. Therefore, these strategies are going to help you whether you are or you're not. Okay, now we're still in this space of, well, we're all a bit neurodivergent, all right? Simply put, we're not, all right? And I think that's something really important to remember. There are lots of people that will find the same things that we find challenging for them, but it's the why that makes the difference, all right? So to be clear, our brains are wired differently, our nervous systems are different, our bodies respond differently to things like medication, pregnancy, menopause. Some of us don't make melatonin, for example, so that affects our sleep patterns. Some of our children don't make fluoride in their back teeth. We don't hold our vitamin D and iron levels well. So some of our community actually have injections to backfill vitamin D, for example. And that sort of knowledge we're learning more and more and more about. And to be clear, we can't turn it off. It's like, I just need to turn my ADHD off so my brain calms down a bit. We can't do that, all right? And we cannot just work harder, as it says here, and things will work out. That's not what this is. We need systems for ourselves, bespoke to our lives and the way that our bodies and brains are working. So when we then look at being aware of a family's needs as a whole, and for those of you that may be following your diagnosis because of your child being diagnosed, or it could be the other way round, that you already have a diagnosis and you're now having a child, all right, it is about looking at the family as a whole. It will make things easier for you. So, for example, if you have a child with an autistic spectrum disorder, there is an 82% chance that one of both of you will have the same diagnostic profile. If it's ADHD, the chances of that happening are actually 94%. So when we look at family needs as a whole, it's the most sensible route to go down, so that you are creating a neurodivergent lifestyle which will keep you all healthy and well and working together as a team. By default, that means, let's just say dad in this picture turns out to have an autistic spectrum disorder. That by default then means that his mum and dad potentially had an autistic spectrum disorder too. And it's the same if mum's ADHD, same situation. So when you go back across generations, you can start to see this argument of why we suddenly got this big number now is not because we've just suddenly landed on the planet, all right? We've always been here because intergenerationally, there were neurodivergent history, people in our history, family history, going back years. It just wouldn't have been called that. Also, it wasn't as high profile, partly because of the words are very normal conversation now, but also society was not as stimulating of our nervous system as it is now. If you think about big supermarkets, screens, music blaring everywhere, all of those things are dysregulating our systems. Therefore, our profile of autism or ADHD becomes suddenly more visible. And that's where an awful lot of the growth has come from. Not because we've suddenly appeared, but because all of a sudden our systems can't cope in the world that we live in now without the adjustments and systems being changed. So we get asked this question a lot: do I diagnose or not? All right, to be clear, this is very much a personal choice, so there's no right or wrong. Basically, I feel whatever decision you make is the right one for you, and that's all that matters. But there are some things to consider. So there are some things where getting that diagnosis can end up being really important. It might be your employer wanting to have that piece of paper, which at the moment is still necessary for in most situations. It could be to do with school, and especially to do with future education. For example, if you're in the UK and you've got a child that may want to go to university, then they won't get any support unless you've got that magic piece of paper. And the disabled student allowance support is actually really good. And so it's definitely worth pursuing it from that perspective. Some people want to get that diagnosis to be able to confirm what their identity is. It enables them to feel validated about who they are and maybe things that have happened in their past. It may also be in that space as well of being able to confirm to family or friends, yes, this is who I am. I have got that diagnosis. Or equally so that you know personally, and not necessarily something you need to share. But it also enables you to access support, and sometimes in places that you might not even have considered. All right, so like traveling by aeroplane, having information to be able to share means that you can have special consideration around getting through airport systems and where you sit on the plane and all of those sorts of things. So that piece of paper can end up being really important, but it shouldn't be necessary really to enable support from schools and employers, but that is where we are right now. But I think more importantly, it helps you understand you, which that validation can be extremely important. So next steps, what do I do now? I think I am. What do I have to do? All right, or do for my child? First is research and collecting information. So not just information about what autism and ADHD are, but starting to see traits and things that you find challenging. My best advice is to almost either use the note feature on your phone. So as soon as you spot something, think, oh, actually, I'm really struggling with the noise in this environment. That could be a thing. So make perhaps a quick voice note on your phone or carry a notebook with you. Everything you just start to spot more. The more you understand what it is and what the presentations may be, then jot it down. Okay. So collect information, research. The more you've got, the better. Those of you with adults, it's helpful if you've got someone that knew you as a child, that you can collect some of that information from about how you were when you were younger, helping them understand what those things may have been as well, because many wouldn't necessarily have known that. And equally, it's also about collecting information from schools and employers, maybe, of how you're presenting now. And then that question of, do I seek an assessment or not? Like I said, whatever one you decide is right for you, that's all that matters. If you want to go down the NHS route, it's then about visiting your GP, expressing your concerns, give them a copy of your research and all the notes and information that you've got, and either going on the NHS list or exploring the private assessors who are working under Right for Choose and asking for that particular organisation to be considered in your application for Right to Choose with your GP, and then that process following on from there. Please, please, please start to find a support network. We know that many of the civil service departments now have an autism and ADHD support network. So that may be something to consider. And even looking locally for groups such as ours, where they may have regular meetups for family members or for children, or play groups, specialist play groups, or even for adults and support networks. We have a group here, for example, a previous member of my team has set up a group specifically for adults, and they have a meeting first all together in her venue that she uses, but then they will go out together as a group, either bowling or cinema, or just normal stuff that maybe they find quite difficult to do without that support. And then making a choice about whether or not you share with friends, family, school and employer. Again, it's not a requirement. It is something for you to consider about whether it feels right for you. But one thing I would say is be aware that once you've shared that information, you've got no control over what that person you've just shared with does with that information. So there could be a little bit of a fallout from some family and some friends, but it's about talking to people like ourselves or within that support network of what you need to do at that point. So do consider that. So there's also other assessments that you might like to consider while you're on the list. All right, so many of us have crossovers in these particular areas, and it can be useful, again, of getting a wider picture of what it may be that your system and your brain are struggling to manage. So getting things like a dyslexia assessment, dyspraxia assessment, which is all to do with coordination, dyscalculia, which is the maths version of dyslexia. Seeking a formal sensory processing disorder assessment can equally be, in fact, it's a game changer, to be fair. Understanding how your nervous system works and where You may need certain exercise routines or certain things that would help you through your day to keep your system all regulated. You might like to get a hearing test and a sight test. All of these things are adding to your knowledge about you. So do consider them moving forward. They can be quite helpful things to do. To be clear, all right, this isn't as simple as just learning how to regulate, how to keep calm, how to make my brain think better. You know, brains are complicated pieces of equipment, and we're only really now starting to understand how all of this links together. But it is about looking at it holistically, not just over one thing. So you have an opportunity to start to understand who you really are, excuse me, and equally how your children really are, and then be able to move forward to positively accept your neurodivergence. That word positively is really important here, right? Because you can say, oh, well, yeah, I've accepted it, but you're still not happy about it. And we want you to be able to feel really positive and strong about your diagnosis and be able to move forward. It's also about other people of all ages learning how to interact with you, not just about you learning how to interact with them. That's a bit that's been missing over the last sort of 20, 30 years. It's very much been focused, as we said, about us fitting into systems as opposed to systems being created to allow us to thrive. And we need that to change. So it isn't just about getting a diagnosis and go and get medication. It's a journey, an opportunity for you to really start to relax into yourself, and because you'll feel better, your health issues will calm down, lots of things will move forward if you've got the right support to be able to move forward in that way. So we talk about creating healthy neurodivergent lifestyles. Looking at someone's life pathways or journeys is crucial. It has to be bespoke for you. So let's just say I'm speaking to someone called Andrew. All right, we have for us as an organization, we have a framework of things that we share that we know work, but we then have to Andrewize them. Okay, so working through that, tweaking. So this worked, this didn't. Okay, let's have a look at that. Why didn't it work? What do we need to change? That becomes really important. Social media is full of advice and support and experiences that other people are having. Some of that is amazing, some of it isn't. And it can be quite tricky sometimes to work out which bits work and which bits don't. What I would say is there'll be bits of most of it that will work, but you have to then look at, well, that didn't work for me. Just, move on from that. There'll be lots of stuff that will work for you. It's not that you failed, you've done anything wrong. It's just that it wasn't the right thing for your particular nervous system and how it works. Okay, so yeah. So our 4 foundation blocks, as I said, those of you that listen to us deliver training before will know what these are. But we've broken neurodivergence down into these sections to make it easier for you to understand it, and it's easier for us to explain it to you too. So the emotional overwhelm, the imagination fracture, which is executive function, language of assumption, which is all the stuff around communication, and the sensory processing differences. And they give you a framework to work from. They will help you collect that evidence for the assessment that is needed. When I get overwhelmed, this happens. I struggle thinking these things through. I need language to be really clear, otherwise I'm not understanding what people are saying to me. I find from a sensory perspective that I get overwhelmed with noise, or I struggle with certain smells and food. All of those things help you pull that together. It then helps you within that to risk assess those things. Is that a really big problem or just a little problem? Moving forward, it can then give you a framework for support plans, what to ask for around adjustments, both for you and your children. It helps you establish a success criteria. So how will I know whether I'm doing better in my sensory processing challenges, by identifying what needs and making adjustments for that. It also helps you identify where you might need to have some extra training or find certain things out. Instead of looking at the whole thing all the time, you're then starting to become a lot more clear about where your needs are and where you need that extra information. So I want to talk about body-brain presentation because this is where the knowledge is now starting to shift. So very often, everyone will focus on that end presentation, like it's really noisy, or I really struggle with this, or I shouted at a co-worker today. What we need to do is start with here. What's going on with your body at that point? Where is that nervous system dysregulated? Our bodies are like sponges, and so we will soak up the environment that we're in. And by that, I don't just mean the physical space. I mean the mood of the people that we're with, the noise that's there. All of those things, our body's soaking them up. That's what builds the dysregulation through our nervous system. It then means that our brain starts to shut down to protect itself. And so we could have almost a paralysis if that body dysregulation is really huge, not able to speak, not able to communicate, total exhaustion. And that will then lead to a presentation like exhaustion, withdrawal, maybe shouting, maybe needing to move. All of those things follow through. They're all linked together like the 4 blocks are. So what are your first thoughts, for example, when you see, hear, or feel you, or yourself rocking or fidgeting, your child not responding to you, or you not being able to respond, not wanting to be able to follow instructions, feeling overwhelmed, or what feels like irrational anger? It goes back to the body-brain presentation point of realizing that for these things to happen, there is some dysregulation going on internally or externally, and that's where we need to concentrate, where the shift comes in. The more you start to identify that, the more you're starting to be able to validate these presentations. And again, realize these are not about, we don't need fixing here, all right? That's not what it is. It's about understanding and being able to make the adjustments around ourselves. So we always need to understand why, and this is where the statement body brain presentation really makes sense. Why are they rocking? Why can't they communicate? Why do they explode over such a small thing, right? Those things are key and they help you move forward. So a huge part of the journey is about change in mindset. Difference is normal. Everybody is. The word neurodivergent means different brain, or neurodiverse means different brain. Neurodivergent is just a subsection of that. As we said, we've always been here. We are taught to conform and control who we are. All right, that's from being where we're really small. And to be clear, our neurodivergence is not an excuse to behave badly, but a reason why we can struggle in current situations. Positive acceptance leads to our health and lifestyle improving. So when we then talk about the overwhelm, where phase number 1 is around being calm, all of our brain and everything is lovely and clear because our emotions and sensory stuff are safe. But as soon as our body becomes very something, whether that's very tired, very hungry, very anxious, there can be lots of verys, all of that brain space then disappears. What tends to happen for us then is we will go back into a mask off the back of that, hide all those emotions and feelings rather than being able to express and find solutions. And that mask can be really, really damaging to the whole of our systems. It can make us unwell. It can take us to do extreme things in extremes. So sleep too much, not at all, eat too much, not at all from a self-medication perspective. And so ultimately, the more we understand ourselves and respond to those needs, those two lines become closer together. So there's more brain space, less physical and emotional stress being caused by masking, and therefore we're in a better place. So all of these things, excuse me, can be signs that we're masking heavily, all right? And look for those things in your children. Don't judge the behavior. Look for the body dysregulation and stress, because that's where this is coming from. responding empathetically to these things, both if they're happening to you. Be kind to yourself. I don't see it as failing, constantly getting things wrong. It's like, okay, what can I learn from this? Where is my body dysregulating? What's caused that dysregulation that's then led to phase number 2, that complete overwhelm, that I can now do something about because I now understand it. We are never okay when we're out and about, even when we're having a good time. I don't know whether letting a giraffe nick your lettuce or whatever it is having a good time. But again, go back to the sponge analogy. When we're in these situations, we can be enjoying ourselves, but we're probably in a really big mask as things stand prior to understanding it. Therefore, we are becoming, oh, there's a picture missing there, I do apologise. We're managing that mask and dysregulation all day to go out and have that good time. It builds and we'll gradually see the brain shut down, and you or your child may go quiet, angry, need physical movement or sleep. Again, bespoke response. What do we need here? What does that particular individual need at that point? But it's understanding that's quite important. Okay. That yes, we can go out, yes, we can have a wonderful time, but we just need to bring this bit in at the end and allow that decompression and allow our systems to settle. So managing overall can be different for everybody, but remember, manage yours or their body first. And this knowledge will build up over time through observation and discussion when the systems are calm. Don't try and speak when they're overwhelmed. Remember, more language will just mean you're adding logs to the fire, which we don't need. So again, we need empathetic responses to these things, right? If someone falls over, it's easier to feel empathy, whereas if they swear at you, it's not necessarily that easy. But actually, both of those, especially with our community, need that empathetic response. So, and it is worth thinking, do you get angry with yourself afterwards, thinking you've failed because you've swore at somebody or whatever? Take that step back. What was going on for me at that point? What can I learn from that so that I can move forward and come at things from a different perspective? The imagination factor is executive functioning. So we use executive functioning for lots of things, most of them things that happen in the future or have happened in the past, like planning, looking ahead. Making a choice means we have to risk assess that choice. Is it good for me, bad for me, right for me, wrong? Where there's an expectation for everybody to be able to do that here ahead of time. All right, when actually neurodivergent brains can struggle with that. That's why we call it an imagination fracture. We can't necessarily visualize things in the future or visualize things from the past in a way that people would expect. Now, to be clear, it's not that we can't do these things. It's just that we need pen and paper to hand so we can write out the plan and see it. So post-it notes can be really, really helpful with these sorts of things, mainly because we could write our plan out for the day, each thing on a post-it note, and then rearrange them into a way that's going to suit us to be able to achieve that, right? It's when we do an awful lot of what we call calendar blocking, for example, especially with the digital calendars, that can be really, really useful. It's certainly something that I use myself personally. So if I've got certain tasks that I know need to be done, I will block that as a time situation in my calendar. And it means that, one, I can move it around if I need to, if something else comes in that becomes a priority, and being able to move the other thing helps me to see where I need to take breaks so that I've got time to breathe. And so it's, again, what's the adjustment that I need to be able to function? It's not that we can't do stuff. We've just been taught to do them in a way that is not right for how our brains and body works. And it's accessing services like us for ongoing training or support or whatever that then helps you unpack that so you know what you need to do. So it is all about making things visible. Choice flow charts. Don't try and think the choice, write it down. If I do this, this and this, or do I do this, this and this? It helps you make a decision. Visual timetables are what would be present in schools, but also visual things on the walls. The digital calendars that I was talking about, making time visible through a digital calendar. You can see what time you've got to be anywhere. It helps enormously. Teaching rules, all right? So it's no good saying to a child, you need to learn, you need to wait Our children need to be taught how to wait. Do they need something to look at while they're waiting? Do they need very clear idea of how long they've got to wait for by seeing the clock move? And you're saying, I'll be done by the time that hand's on the number 3, all right? And then they can see that time move. And that might be really helpful for you too. Backward storylines, anxiety assessments, target sheets, communication boards. Look at some of our back trainings that are on your civil service charity portal, and you'll learn more and more about these things, but also keeping an eye on the trainings that we do, not necessarily for civil service, but lots of the other trainings that we do. You'll see all of these things mentioned in there. Some of them may also pop up on here too, but just be aware. It's not that you can't do these things, guys. It's about you developing visual strategies rather than to try and do it all in your head, because that's where it goes wrong. Language and clear language is important to us. I think sometimes that can be really misinterpreted about what we mean by clear language, because they'll say, well, I was very clear. I wanted them to tidy up the room, for example. But actually, everyone will have a different concept of what that word tidy means to them. So a teenager's version of what is tidy and a parent's version of what is tidy can be miles apart. All right. So being more specific is probably a much better way of describing that. We need specific language. So I need you to put all of your dirty washing that is all over the floor in that bin over there. All right. Then you've not just used the word tidy, you're very clear about what it is you want them to achieve. And language doesn't just come in verbal formats, all right? It comes in lots of other things too. So be aware of that. Things that are going to confuse them can be really hard and equally can be confusing for you. These are the types of things, once you spot them, need to go in that form when you're looking at assessment, but also they're useful for when you're then looking at adjustments within your workplace or school. Being able to say, I need my emails to be really clear. I need a header. I need to know whether or not it needs to be dealt with today, or whether I can leave it until tomorrow. Those sorts of things can make your system feel much calmer over the course of a day, and they really don't take a lot of effort from anyone else around you to be able to achieve those. So give and ask for clear instructions and expectations. So unclear language is a huge part of the nervous system build, and in some respects the easiest one to solve, because it's just about changing the words that you use. It doesn't need a special resource or anything like that at all. The thing is, we talk nonsense a lot of the time, all right? We can cause huge rejection sensitive dysphoria, which is very much an ADHD thing, and demand avoidance by using the wrong language. So again, changing the way we communicate and helping you understand that. And these are the sorts of things that we can supply you with lots more information about, can make a huge difference around calming down that dysregulation. So give and ask for clear instruction expert around these sorts of things within a workplace: meeting agendas, contracts, interviews, forms, prioritizing and instructions. These can be areas where you need that support. This is a lovely flat pack furniture thing, which we were struggling with in our own space last weekend, and caused some very interesting conversations between the 3 neurodivergent people that were trying to put that together. Right. So be aware that we need to take a step back and breathe and come back in and read instructions again. All of these things help, all right? So think about things like using names first, all right? Words that can mean different things, using the real word for something, not just a jokey word or a funny word or whatever. Banter, assumed statements can cause big problems. The reason I've got the milk there is where we had a husband just shout into the middle of the room to his autistic wife, "Are you going out today?" And she went, "Yep." And he went, "Oh, great." And then 2 minutes later came back and said, "We've run out of milk." All right. And she came home from work, and the first thing was, "Did you get the milk today?" And she went, "What do you mean, did I get the milk?" "Well, I said this morning, I asked you if you were going out and told you that we'd run out of milk." "Yes, but you didn't tell me to get the milk." Right. So that one little word, 2 words, can you get the milk? All right. The "you get" was missing. And so those assumed statements of, "I assumed you'd know what I mean," we're not going to know unless you're really, really clear. The sensory processing can be massive and is a game changer, right? The more you can get assessed and understand how it means for you or your child, and this is stuff you can instigate right away, and it really does help to calm things down. So it's a condition where the brain has trouble receiving and responding to sensory information. Things like sound, sight, taste, touch, pain, being able to feel when you need to go to the loo, when you're hungry, all of these things come into that. And we may be overly sensitive to certain stimulus, i.e. we're hypersensitive, or not react to stimuli that others would, in which case we're hyposensitive. And the more you can understand that, and it is genuinely a complete game changer. So it's something to do a lot more research on this period of time while you're waiting for assessment. If the more you understand this, I can promise you it will change an awful lot of things. So please do some homework on it. Again, if you need more information, feel free to get in touch with us and we'll do our best to help you. Again, this stuff is real, all right? We're not making a fuss, being awkward. We get that a lot. Well, you're just making a fuss over that noise, for goodness sake. It's just the clock ticking. But something like that can be really, really debilitating if you are hypersensitive to sound. My big hypersensitivity is mostly to light. So I spend an awful lot of time with sunglasses on. I wear sunglasses in the supermarket. All of those types of things. And it is about feeling comfortable to make that change of, I'm not being weird here. This is helping me function. And I could look quite cool walking down the supermarket with sunglasses on. That's the way I interpret that anyway, right? But I'm sure other people think it looks a bit weird, but I feel I'm being cool. All right, so it's learning to walk through it and use it, not be ashamed that I need to have these noise reduction headphones on when nobody else does, that sort of thing. All right, and helping our children see that everybody needs support structures and strategy. At the end of the day, normalizing strategies is important. Talk to them about the sat nav in your car. That is a strategy. Everybody uses it and it helps people get from A to B. It's no different to noise reduction headphones or whatever. All right. And exposing us to things won't make it go away. Get that a lot. Well, they've got to learn to deal with noise. They've got to get used to it. No, all it does will make them unwell if you keep exposing them to things that their system can't manage. So ask questions of your child and yourself. How do I or you feel pain? They might not feel it at all. My middle son doesn't feel pain. You might think that's a benefit, but actually it can be really dangerous. So it's something to understand. How do you need that communication to be? Short and sharp? Can you be with big things? Do you need it written down? Do you need it written on a board? You know, what do I need that to be? Do you or I need breaks sometimes? Now, I need breaks in between my support sessions that I deliver for people. I need a half an hour to allow my brain to reset, and then I can move into the next session. Is the light too bright? Are your clothes feeling itchy or tight? The thing is, a lot of us will be aware that maybe we're feeling uncomfortable in a setting, but nobody has given us this sort of framework to work out what it is in that setting that's causing the dysregulation. So that's why you need to understand it more, because then you're more able to identify and feel some peace around that it's not me being weird or odd or whatever. My body's just not responding to that particular stimulus very well. Therefore, we need to change that. So it's not just about a sensory space. It's about the whole home, school, car, or workplace. All right. Those things are important. Hold on, this won't stay up out the way. So like that as a classroom is a nightmare for most primary school children. Right? So much colour and stuff everywhere, things hanging off the ceiling. I can't begin to tell you. Right? Messy cars. It looks like my daughter's car actually. All right. And those, it's everywhere needs to consideration. That office may be great for some people, but for some neurodivergent people, it will be like stimulus overload, and that soak of being in that environment with that sponge effect could mean that they're completely systems dysregulated by 9:30 in the morning, and then they've got to cope and mask that for the rest of the day. So becoming more aware of what's dysregulating for you and finding ways through that will really make a difference for you. So now think about yourself or your child, based on what you know now, how can you start to change things, right? Start using the 4 blocks. Do I concentrate on one to start with? It's not a bad place to start. All right. Remember, if you're pre-diagnosis and you're looking to move forward with that, start making notes so that you're collecting evidence, if you like, to be able to take to the health teams. How can you best use the blocks to help yourself, to help your children, to help your colleagues at work, your friends, your family? Where do you move with that? And what do you want those around you to start to understand, or to help you understand too? All right, this stuff isn't always easy. So we need to start finding balancing how our day works. And the more you understand things, the more you start to see how you spend your day. You've got to start coming to terms with this new reality that you weren't expecting, that actually may, on one hand, give you a lot of answers, but may also raise a lot of questions, and you're backtracking through a situation that might open some old wounds that need exploring. Don't be afraid to face them, but do find your person that you can talk things through with. Remember, this is a marathon, not a sprint. That one piece of paper that gives you a diagnosis is literally that. It's one piece of paper that gives you a diagnosis, all right? You're on a journey of self-discovery, and your children will be on that journey with you. And so create a support system within that family network to move forward and speak to people, as I say, like ourselves. There will be local organisations to you that may be able to help too. So support should not begin or end with a diagnosis. All right, it's an ongoing process. So as an organisation, we provide monthly themes that are followed on by newsletters that contain more support with that, ongoing understanding through a monthly training that we do that's connected to the theme, going through our social media, which will also continue with that theme for that particular month. Nervous system informed support, accessible lifestyles, community continuity, which is really important. This is how you can reach us directly, but to be clear, there's also things available to you through us, through the civil service charity as well. So it's always worth speaking to them as well. So that's me. I think we've got some time left now to pick up some questions. So I'll stop sharing.
I've stopped your sharing. Thank you.
Thank you. You were ahead of me there, Kath.
Yeah. Thank you so much for that. I mean, it's so interesting. And obviously, it's like so much new information that's coming in all the time, isn't it? So,
yeah, definitely.
We've got masses of questions.
I'm not
We've got
surprised.
15 minutes. The chances of getting through them all is fairly
You can
slim.
group them, Kath,
Yeah.
into some general
Yeah.
themes. We can always go out afterwards with
So we've got several questions about waiting lists. So apologies to people. I'm not going to be able to ask each question independently. Some I will, but some I won't be able to. Various questions about waiting lists around things like how long somebody who's been on the waiting list for 3 years, how much longer might they have to wait? Another question about my daughter, I can't remember if it's daughter or son, got onto the waiting list as a child, but they're now 18 and at uni. Do they have to kind of reapply again?
Okay, I can give you some little
Yes.
things around that.
Yes.
Waiting lists are very localized. So unfortunately, I'd love to be able to give you a clear indication of it from a UK perspective, but that's not how it works. So each health commissioning board will have their own system in place and their own lists. Locally here, we're now starting to, and we're Suffolk, we're starting to see Essex, the next county, they're bringing in external teams that will pick up, say, 20 children over a weekend and really run through them. That's great because it's really cutting their waiting list down significantly. I'd love to think that everybody starts to do that, but we've got no control over that, sadly. So I wish I could make that easier for you, but I can't. As with the situation with the child that was diagnosed and then going on to or sitting on list as a child and thing, a lot of the lists, especially over COVID and all those sort of places, the list got messy. People fell off the radar, however you want to do that. So go back to your GP if necessary, get them to make an inquiry with the people that hold the list. Again, look at what's available within your local area, where you need to go to get that information. It's very possible, sadly, that they may have to go back on a list, but also check with the university. A lot of the universities are facilitating assessments, so it's definitely worth speaking to them too, because you might be able to get pushed through to the front.
Yeah, thank you. And do you have any advice, Annie, for people who are not in England? Because I understand Right to Choose is not available in Wales, Scotland, and Northern Ireland.
No, it isn't.
And so, yeah, so any further advice for them?
Not anything other than I've already said, unfortunately. It is about speaking to what's available in your local geographical area and seeing what comes up from that. It's a muddle, I think, but that's why start now is what I'm saying, from the sort of stuff that we've said, because it will help you. It's not the be and end all, but it is worth pursuing that route and get pushy. I don't mean to be funny, but you have to become quite assertive to get through the middle.
Yes, it does. It's often about the people in these situations, the people that shout the loudest.
Sadly, yes, but it's a reality.
Yes, yeah. Yeah, so there is quite, I mean, there's somebody else talking about how to prepare for a meeting. They're having a struggle with school refusal with their child, but the school is saying they won't put any support in at the moment.
Okay, if you need a letter from us to back you up, then send me an email, please, because we will do that. All right. They need to get past this. It is not okay. All right. I don't know any other situation where a child would be left to suffer when it's so obvious that they need support and they need to get out of their own way. They're not helping themselves, to be honest, because the behaviour will just escalate and they'll end up with a bigger problem in a classroom. It makes no sense to me whatsoever, especially given that the strategies are not going to hurt that child or the rest of the kids in the class who just get on with it. So if you need any help with that, please email me and we'll see what we can do.
I mean, maybe I'm just going to take a break from the question just for a minute. And I know David's put it in the chat about the support through the charity that people can get. So if you're feeling that you need support from, around this issue from Autism and ADHD, from Annie's organisation, if you make an application to the charity and request a wellbeing conversation, we can look at how that might work for you. So sometimes we're able to fund one-to-one sessions with autism and ADHD, which people have found quite life-changing often. That is through a financial application. So there are certain restrictions on that, such as you need to have under £6,000 worth in savings. Obviously, we may also be able to, if you're able to self-fund, we may also be able to help to give you the link to move that forward as well, or you can contact them directly. If you come through for a wellbeing conversation with the charity, and I'm sorry because there is quite a wait at the moment, we've got a very long waiting list, we may also be able to set you up with a membership. That you've got a lifestyle zone, haven't you, which is
that's a big piece of development over the summer. Actually, we're going to turn it into a resource hub, so it's got even more stuff that's already in there. You can access that yourselves now, right? If you go on the website, it's in the top right hand corner, you'll see the zone little button, and that's £15 a month. So it's a reasonable amount to get some immediate information that will back up the stuff that we've been talking about today.
And if you come through the wellbeing team, obviously we can facilitate that free for a year. It's just you'll get it immediately if you go to the Autism and ADHD website.
And you can cancel whenever you like. All right. So you might go in there, spend 2-3 weeks in and come out. And that's absolutely fine. There's no restriction on that whatsoever.
And somebody's actually put in the chat here, I think we're all asking what to do in the absence of a diagnosis, which is, absolutely right. And in many ways, this is what you've been talking about, is what can you do? I mean, there's been a question about what employer responsibilities there are if there isn't a diagnosis.
Okay, so I can
departments will, I'm sorry, Annie, and then also whether departments will accept private assessments. Now, I know that as the charity, I know that I couldn't comment on that part of it at all.
Right, so the legal structure as it stands now, right, if you have a diagnosis and you go for a job and you disclose, the employer has a legal responsibility to respond to that. If you don't have a diagnosis and you're employed and you get a diagnosis during your employment and disclose it, again, they have to disclose. They have to respond to that. Okay. At the moment, there is nothing in place if you are sitting there with nothing confirmed from a clinical perspective, that they have to legally take your word for it, if you like. A good employer would still send you to access to work and get you assessed on need, and they would respond to that need, whatever that may be. But that is different everywhere you go, because there's no legal. Again, if you've got a diagnosis and you don't disclose prior to taking a job, they don't have to respond to that either. If you suddenly say, I'm really struggling and I've got this ADHD, they don't have to respond to that either. So it is about when you disclose, if you disclose at all, and where you go with it. But should they listen to you anyway? Yes, just speaking as someone, my team are all neurodivergent, okay? 90% of the time, that's amazing, but we all have our bad days. That's all I can say on the matter, okay? But I think, just speaking from a common sense viewpoint of that, what is the point of not responding to a member of staff's need? It's going to end up costing you more money financially in lack of productivity, lack of engagement. Exactly. That person's likely then to go off long-term sick. It just makes no sense to me logically why an employer would ignore it. But are they allowed to? Depending on where that disclosure comes from, yes, they are. But that we're trying to change that both in employment and school. That's one of the big agendas that we're hitting.
I'm going to move away from that a little bit. I know there are some questions that haven't been answered, but there's been a few other kind of things as well. This is probably a very quick yes or no, if you know the answer to this, Annie, which is somebody's talked about their child's nervousness about getting a diagnosis because they're considering a military career.
Okay, yes.
Likely to have an impact.
It was a case and it got taken to court, rightly, all right? The army would not employ people with autism and ADHD if the diagnosis was disclosed. We actually work with the British Army already, so I can speak relatively easy about this one. Even though there were quite a lot of autistic people in the army, to be fair, right? Because army regime sort of follows quite nicely about where that is. That was challenged eventually, and they will now take people with autism and ADHD. And the Air Force and the Navy were already there. But just so that you know, as far as I'm aware, it is still the case that if you have ADHD, you have to be med-free. All right. And certainly the RAF, as far as I'm aware, it was that you had to be med-free for 3 years. So where we had a base at a local college and they were doing public services courses, we'd often have young people come to us and say, we want to apply for the Navy. I've got to be med-free. Can you help me? Do you know what I mean? And we would then help them build strategies and all the rest of it, so they didn't need their medication quite the same way. When you think about it logically, I can understand why. All right. And just so that you can validate it, my understanding of it is the concern is if you've got somebody with ADHD who is heavily dependent on medication, they get sent to a war zone, for example, and their meds run out. That is not a clever and safe situation for anybody at that point to be in at all. So they would rather we'd put something together to support that person to come off that medication, so they've got structures and proper strategies in place to manage that condition rather than being completely reliant on the medication. So as always, these things are changing all of the time, all right? But as far as I'm aware, that is where we currently are. So they are all accepting applications from autism and ADHD, but some of them may still be in that space of we need you to be med-free for a certain period of time before you come in. So it's worth speaking to the recruitment teams and just finding out where you stand.
Thank you, Annie. Yeah, we're coming towards the end. There were a couple of questions actually, which I meant to come to at the beginning, which is about, I'm not particularly going to ask you to respond to these at the moment, Annie, but about the foundation blocks where somebody was trying to take notes and missed some of it, and somebody came in a little bit late. I don't know whether you want to revisit those just for the last 30 seconds.
Okay. So two things. Once you get this recording up on the thing, you'll be able to get them and pause it and write them all down. But the four of them are emotional overwhelm. Okay. Imagination fracture, which is the term that we use to help explain executive functioning. Sensory processing disorder. And language of assumption, which is all of the work around communication and language in its broadest sense, where we don't need people using assumed language with us because our brains don't backfill what wasn't said in a way maybe that was intended. So but any of the videos you watch, as you know, that we've delivered over the years, will have the 4 blocks in there if you want to revisit them, because they're the chain that holds all of our work together.
Thank you so much, Annie, and everyone who's on the call. I'm really sorry we haven't got to all the questions. I think some of them might be answered by either re-listening to this or listening to some of the other sessions. I mean, really, Annie's organisation is amazing, and we are able to facilitate. You know, if you're in the position to need financial assistance, we are in the position to facilitate access to the services in her organisation. There will be a little wait for that, but I think it's really important that you remember that. You've also got the membership of Autism and ADHD, which, as Annie has said, you can sign up for immediately for £15 a month.
And if you sign up on the newsletter, all right, we have a monthly theme. The week before that month, so the last week in May, there'll be a newsletter goes out which tells you what the theme's going to be for June. They'll give you the information about what the training is going to be to help you with that. And our social media will run that theme all the way through that month. So you'll pick up, and that, the training is a tenner. The rest of it is all free. So it's worth signing up just for the newsletter and being able to engage with us in that way if it's difficult for you to access this and any other. So we always want to make sure there's a lower income level to come in at, so as many people as possible can access the support.
And we are going to have to wind up now. As I said, I'm really sorry we haven't got to all your questions. I'm going to suspect, Annie, that there may have been some people today who are new to your sessions, who may not have sat in on some of the other ones. There are many on our website now, and as Annie said, if you join her organisation, there's a regular training every month, is it? Yeah, regular training every month. So there are lots of resources available. We are in this difficult time where there's a long waiting list in a lot of places. I mean, somebody's put in the chat 8 years in Northern Ireland.
It's ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous.
And kind of almost like in a position where hopefully we're moving towards more of an understanding that actually you can put things in place now without needing the formal
today. Don't hang about, just do it.
Yeah. But really hope that the session has given you some food for thought about things that you can be doing for yourselves, for your families. And please don't hesitate to reach out if there is something that you think that we can assist with. So Annie, thank you so much as always for your time. Okay. Really interesting session. Thanks everyone for joining, and we'll see you again next time.